Hey, what's happening, everybody? It's Matthew Stanley here, and welcome to another episode of LEMONdrops, the official podcast of Lemon. Hey, everybody. Just to start this off, I think I'm going to shut up for probably a couple more minutes just because I want to let this intro music play because I'm kind of digging it. Hey, what's happening, everybody? I am back. I just wanted to let that play for a little bit because, like I said, I dug it. The name of the track is Lounge Lizard. I got it from Audio Blocks, which is a really good website for audio music, royalty-free stuff, sound effects, and loops, and just anything audio-wise. Audio Blocks. I'm not affiliated with them in any way except for the fact that, I use their services. Also, another good one is Audio Hero. I'm actually really surprised by how good they are, and I got them when I signed up for a subscription with TubeBuddy, which is a service that kind of helps you with search stuff for, just helps you better your YouTube channel. And I'm actually pretty amazed at the stuff that they can do. So check them out. Audio Blocks, Audio Hero, and TubeBuddy. TUBE Buddy. Anyway, tonight it's kind of interesting because I was kind of thinking about... Well, today, I was thinking about inspiration. I've actually been thinking about it for a couple days now. Yeah, I know. I think it's kind of... I feel like, I sit there... Like the first podcast, I said I'm going to talk about what it's like, trying to start up and run a business. Then I decided, because of everything else that's happened, that a lot of the podcasts after that we're going to take care. I was going to talk some about the divorce, and here I am talking about neither of those things, just because you kind of get I just need to lighten up some. So I was thinking about inspiration, and it's been a while since I've felt, really kind of inspired, since a story popped into my mind. And I didn't really, I knew that I missed it, but I didn't realize how much I had missed it until I had experienced that this week. And I think to me, it's always kind of interesting where stories come from. Scripts, ideas for movies, just the ideas of them. And then, of course, how the story comes from the idea. And a lot of times for me, those things seem to happen like when I'm listening to music. I'll listen to some song, and all of a sudden, I can envision a scene to a movie or a story from that song. And then I end up listening to that song. It gets in constant rotation, constant play for a very, very long time while I round out this scene in my head. Then the next thing I know, I start developing a story around this scene. And then after that, at least that's how it was in the past. And then I'd sit down and I'd write it. And it, inspiration for me comes from other places too. A lot of times it seems to happen, maybe I'm in the shower or driving my car. It happens a lot especially if I'm on a road trip. And, but this go round, it was kind of interesting, especially the last two story ideas that I've had that were, brought on by inspiration. And, that hasn't happened to me for probably about, I would say maybe 8 years, which is a long time because, in the past it seemed to happen all the time. And, some of the stories would get fleshed out totally. I'd know, maybe not totally, but I'd have a majority of the story in my head. A lot of times I would write them, or I'd start to write them. But I went through this period of where it was just like major writer's block. Well, the first one happened at towards the end of last year. And it ended up becoming a story idea that I thought of it ended up being called Driver. And I thought the inspiration for that story was pretty interesting because I had gone to a local bar here with my soon-to-be ex-wife and my brothers and sister-in-laws. And the place in town, it's in Joplin, it's called Infusion. It's a really, really cool place. And it's a vodka bar. And so we went there, and they were... we were all just hanging out. They were drinking, and I was the designated driver. But somewhere along the line, while we were talking about that, my sister-in-law started talking about Uber, and they had like their favorite Uber driver that they like to use. And it kind of became interesting to me because I just sat there listening to him talk, and I thought all of a sudden, what if... like at first it was kind of like, what if this Uber-esque driver was, like kind of following this lady around, but you didn't really know why. You kind of thought maybe he's, got it out for her, or, could he be helping her? You just don't know. And so the longer the night went on, and the more I thought about the story, and I thought about it over a few weeks and started to develop a soundtrack in my head and listen to the songs. The next thing I know, I ended up having a story that revolved around a driver of a company called Superb, just because I thought if I ever got around to doing this, I'd love for Uber to sponsor it, to produce it, or any taxi service like that. And basically the drivers are, almost kind of like bodyguards. They protect the people that get in their cars. And this one driver, and that ended up kind of becoming the name of this character because I kind of thought of him as like, a Clint Eastwood-esque kind of man with no name, and he's protecting these girls. And you do end up finding out that one of the girls that he's protecting, he was asked to watch over and protect because he had served with her brother in the military, and her brother had passed away under mysterious circumstances. And one of his requests was for Driver to watch over his sister, because you end up finding out that he had his suspicions where after they got him, they would go after her. And of course she really has no idea why they're after her. And it ended up becoming like a big, government conspiracy type thing. And one of the things that I thought would be interesting is if a lot of the drivers that he works with, they're kind of like, they work like this squad. They all have military type backgrounds. They all have their specialties. And it's this whole network of people that are there to protect those that can't protect themselves and to help those that can't help themselves. In fact, when I was seeing the trailers for Equalizer 2, where he was a Lyft driver, I was like, oh my gosh, man. Not that he stole my idea, because I do think that way, and I'm kind of like, a lot of times my personal feeling on that is, if you steal my idea, do it as well as I would, or do it better, please. But I went and watched it and was actually kind of, I liked the first one better. I didn't think the second one was all that good. Sorry, Denzel. You are one of my absolute favorite actors, and, I just couldn't get with Equalizer 2. Anyway, it was still enjoyable to watch Denzel. He's always enjoyable to watch. But I was glad that they didn't take that route. And like one of the scenes that kind of came up first with, when I first started thinking about it, was just this kind of iconic scene, at least in my mind, of Driver, dropping the girls off, and then because they'd been out drinking that night, one of the girls leaves the purses in his car. And so before he leaves, he goes back up to their house with the purse to hand it back to him. And when they answer the door, there's, like 4 or 5 other dudes that are in the house with them already. And they're acting a little shady, but they're also trying to act like they're with the 3 gals. It's 3 girls. And Driver, suspects something's up, and it's not good. And so he goes back to his car, acts like he's going to leave, grabs a tire iron, and goes back up to the house, and ends up just beating the crud out of these dudes with a tire iron. And I kind of thought that the tire iron would be one of those symbolic type deals for this for the character Driver. And that's how, that's where it first started for me. And I ended up coming up with some other ideas that I think would be interesting to do it. And the movie hasn't fully fleshed itself out to me yet. And I think about it every now and then. But just with everything else that's been going on in my life, it kind of got put on the back burner. And then earlier this week, something, and this is the second interesting, to me at least, inspiration that that just hit me from nowhere. And I had been listening a lot to podcasts and things like that on the Mandela effect. And to me, it's still kind of hard to explain. Yes, I know. Cuckoo, cuckoo. But conspiracy theories interest me, okay? So I'm listening to this podcast, and they're talking about, the Mandela effect. In fact, X-Files season 11 had an episode on it, and it was really funny. I actually watched that today. But, so I'm listening to all this stuff because it has, there's lots of different theories about it. Of course, one of them is that it's not real. But it reminded me, and it deals with like parallel universes, or like, somebody going back in time and changing history. It has to do with, people not remembering certain things that are there. If I find a good enough definition, I'll post it down in the notes, so you guys can check it out. And I'm not saying whether I subscribe to it or not, but I just find it very interesting. And how my mind works, it always kind of goes back to, how could you tell this in an interesting story? And because I thought it was an interesting concept. So But the thing is it reminded me of a dream that I had years and years and years and years and years and years and years ago. And in this dream, I went to sleep in the real world. And in the dream, I woke up. And now, before I get any further, I got to let you know that my dreams are really, really vivid. Colors, sounds, smells. I mean, it's, for the most part, a lot of times it's as vivid and real as life. And so when I have especially dreams like this, and I went to sleep, like I said, in real life, and I woke up in the dream. And the weird thing is when I woke up in the dream, I was in a bed waking up in my dream. And I could hear the sounds of my family coming from another room. And I remember thinking, and at this time I was single, so it was probably about like 10, 12 years ago. And I remember thinking to myself, what is my family doing here? And at the time I had lived in a loft. So, there were no different rooms. There was just one big, huge room, except for the bathroom, and they weren't all congregating in there. And when I actually started to wake up in my dream, I realized that I was in a room that was totally different than the room I went to sleep in. And I'm looking around thinking, where in the heck am I? And then all of a sudden, my wife, who is a woman I've never seen before, comes into the bedroom and she's holding a baby. And I don't remember if it was, a son or a daughter. And, this gal, who's my wife in the dream, pops in and she's just like, hey, honey, your family's here. Why don't you get up, sleepyhead, and kind of goofing around with me. Come in and say hi. And I'm like, I remember thinking, I got to play this out because I got to figure out what's happening. And so I go into the other room and, I've got three, I've got my mom and my dad are in there. I got my three younger brothers, and they're, the two of them are with their wives. One didn't, he wasn't married yet, and he's there by himself. And we all just sit and we talk for a while. And the whole time I remember thinking to myself, why, I'm like, why are they acting like this is normal? This is not normal life. Something's really wrong here, and I don't know what it is. I don't even know where to start. And so I'm playing along, though, like it is normal. And so, they end up deciding to leave, and I'm walking out with them. And when I walk out, we have to walk down a hall, and these are really, really nice apartments. Walk down a hall, get in an elevator, and take the elevator down to the ground floor. Get out, and I mean, the apartments are like really nice hotel. It's like a super nice hotel. And so we're walking out to their cars, and, I'm hugging them all, saying goodbye to all of them, and then the brother that comes right after me, Ryan, gets in his, he loads his family up in his car. And I don't remember exactly what he said to me, but because it happened so long ago, but he said, he's like, you told me a long time ago that if such and such happens, I'm supposed to tell you such and such. And then he's like, watch your back. And he gets in his car and he leaves. And I remember thinking, okay, yeah, something is wrong here. And so I go back up to my apartment, and I can't even begin to think of where to start, how to unravel this mystery. And I'm sitting there trying to figure things out. My wife is talking to me, and it's just going in one ear and out the other. And I'm looking at my baby, and, I'm holding this child. And of course, I don't have it. At that time, I didn't have any children. And my wife is just kind of like, are you okay? What's wrong? And I thought, I can either keep everything from her and not tell her what's happening, or I can just tell her the truth. And I opted for the truth. And she, of course, was kind of freaked out. And, I was just like, hey, look, my name's Matthew Stanley. And she's like, I know that. I'm your wife. And I'm like, this isn't my life. I'm single. I live in a duplex in a small Midwestern town. This is like a huge city, and this is a really nice apartment. It's totally different than what the place I live in. I don't have a child. And, I remember looking at this baby and I could just see me in this child. And I'm just like, I don't know what this is. I don't know what's happening. And unfortunately, that's all of the dream that I can remember now. I used to write in dream journals all the time, but I stopped that years ago. And this actually made me think about picking it up and starting it again, because I would get ideas from dreams that I had. But so I'm remembering this and thinking about the Mandela effect. And I thought that would make a cool story. What if you started it off like that? The main character goes home, goes to sleep, and I'm talking like within 5 minutes, you explain this character's story, you kind of see his life maybe through a montage, and then he wakes up and his world is totally different. And play that part out exactly almost like how I had the dream, where, he walks his family out, he's playing normal, and then his brother gives him that warning, and then all of a sudden his life just turns upside down. And, with the Mandela effect, I ended up thinking that because a lot of people out there believe that it's caused, or I think it's also called a quantum effect, but it's caused by, colliders like the Large Hadron Collider or D-Wave computers or both. And I started thinking, what if in his previous life, which, you as a viewer didn't know, before this big change, there was something that was going on where he knew that these changes would affect the world in the way that it is. And it just totally changed his life, his world. Somebody went back in the past, flipped a switch or whatever, so to speak, and it changed it. And because that was something that I started thinking about the Mandela effect, because everybody talks about, all these changes that have happened. And I just started thinking, well, what if those changes happened to somebody personally and it just drastically changed their life? How would you handle that? And of course, the main hero would be some sort of military badass, because I'm a huge action movie fan. And, I just started thinking that it would be, you can make it such an interesting story. His memories start to come back of what his real life is. He starts to, or they're already there kind of, but maybe he starts to unwrap them more. So anyway, and like I said, it just happened a couple days ago, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about something lighter than what I've been talking about. I also kind of wanted just to let people, excuse me for the cough there. I think I love, like I said at the beginning of this, I love hearing where stories come from. And I love that whole process of it. When a story comes in and you start to flesh it out, you start to develop the characters, you start to develop the backstory. That's one of my favorite things to do, is to develop, the characters that are involved in it. And they may seem one-dimensional with some of the things that I've done, but, on paper, there's always so much more that I feel doesn't go into or onto the screen. But then at the same time, I'm like, there's so much more that goes into it, with the people that I've had the privilege of working with, the actors, where they bring so much little nuances into those characters that make them real people. I mean, and, the last video I did, and I know that it's been 10 years, the last movie, there was a guy that I worked with called Josh Trammell. Man, sorry guys, I don't know what the deal is. Let me take a drink of my Blue Sky Cherry Vanilla Soda. That's much better. But it was a blast to watch Josh play this character. And it was from the movie Justice. And you would literally see like Josh's countenance, just his face, as soon as, I would say action or right before, he would just change physically into this character. And he brought this character to life so much more better than I could have envisioned, or that I did envision him. And, we kind of worked together. I knew like he had the same body type that I always felt his character Gustav had. But, the style of dress, he grew kind of this greasy styled mustache because, he was a bad guy. And I was like blown away by that. And another guy and everybody actually blew me away, the little things that they would do on that set. My good friend Jamie played a character called Hammer, who was just a complete badass. And Jamie just brought kind of this, he just had this attitude about him to me that just totally reflected how I felt that character's attitude was. A guy named Juan Simmons, who had never done anything like this before and decided to do it just to basically say that he did it, played the main bad guy and actually brought a style to him that I had not anticipated. And a lot of it was, I remember him asking if he could wear a suit, and I was like, sure. And he went out and bought a suit. He wondered and asked if he could smoke a cigar, and I was like, go for it. So his character smoked a cigar, and it was awesome. So those are, and I remember one thing I thought was interesting doing that as well was one of my buddies from high school, and his name's Brad Shipp, and he's also an awesome artist on DeviantArt. He was known as Zero Optics with an X at the end. Awesome artist. And but he had done like martial arts and stuff his whole life. And I don't remember how this idea came about, but I just started thinking, because in this crazy world, because Justice was kind of a superhero, a modern ghetto superhero Western. And I just thought it'd be interesting, because Brad had been around for almost all the shoots, and, he helped choreograph a lot of the fights and stuff. And I just thought it'd be kind of cool to give him a part in it. And I was giving anybody that showed up a lot, I was always like, dude, since you're here, why don't you just do this? And because I did kind of learn that, people that are hanging out for the most part, they really, really want to be a part of it. So, if you're shooting a flick and you've got somebody that you haven't given a part to, and they're hanging out there with you day and night, and they're right in it, and you may not know them that well, but you may develop a relationship with them later, and most people end up doing that anyway. Ask if they're interested, because chances are they are, and they're waiting for an invitation to get in there. And so I just thought it'd be kind of cool to have like I wanted some sort of martial arts guy to be kind of like the bodyguard of the main bad guy. And so I thought of, I was like, I'm a huge fan of Big Trouble in Little China. And I thought, what if we could get like some huge, hat like the Three Storms wore in Big Trouble in Little China. And of course, I'm like, nobody anywhere has those types of hat except for maybe one person. And I said, I bet Brad probably has those hats. And so I was telling him about the character idea that I had. And I asked if he had those hats and if he'd be interested or willing to do it. And he said he did. He had two of them. They were at his mom's house, I believe. So he had to go and get them. She lived down in Arkansas, I think. And, showed them to me. We picked one. We developed a character for him. Ended up calling him Bushido Bastard. I believe Brad came up with that name. And, he ended up just... the scenes he ended up being in, Brad just rocked it out, and that hat was totally perfect. So anyway, yeah, I could babble about that stuff all day long. So all this to say that, when you feel inspiration come on with whatever project you're working on, and maybe it's a story idea that you're working on and it's going in a totally different direction than what you had originally planned, I say roll with it, man. See where it goes. Because I feel a lot of time, the stories, the characters, even, especially the characters, and especially the story. Once you sit down and you start writing that stuff out, it really does take a life on its own. And to me, part of the fun of doing that, writing those stories, developing those characters, is seeing where it all leads you, because you start to get a sense as to, like, would this character actually say that? Would he not say that? Would he act this way? Would he not act that way? Or she? You start to really kind of get a sense of who they are, and you may start to get a sense too as to whether you're trying to force something into a story or not. And that's man, sorry guys. That's something I've had to deal with too, where, you come up with a great scene for a movie and you end up, you just can't fit it in anywhere. And if you do fit it in, it's extremely forced, and you can feel it. You can feel that it's forced. And, I kind of feel like, once that happens, if you can't fit it in and have it flow naturally, then most likely it just needs to be cut. And even if you're doing that with editing, I've learned that you can find those things out when you're editing too, where you're just forcing the video to work because you have an idea of how you want it to go this way, but once you get to working on it, you realize, wow, it's not going that way at all. And if you try and force it, it just ends up making it not work. So I'm listening to some Dead Mouse right now. I think the song is Evaricia. Anyway, I've gotten on a big kick on him. He's kind of, in fact, when I was thinking of Driver, one of the songs that inspired me that I listened to was I Remember. So anyway, guys, if there's anybody out there that's listening to this, I apologize. If you feel like you wasted 32 minutes of your life listening to me babble, because that's all I've really done. I tried to kind of make this helpful, but it really ended up just becoming an episode of me just talking to myself. Which, in all honesty, that's probably what a majority of these will be. So anyway, drop me a note, subscribe to the podcast. If you have ideas that you're trying to figure out, or ideas that you feel like you'd like to share, or input, where does inspiration come for you? How do you get inspired? How do you stick with that inspiration? How do you keep it going? Because sometimes it's hard to keep it going, especially when the story and things like that aren't, those pieces aren't fitting together like you'd like them to. So anyway, thanks for listening again. Subscribe, LEMONdrops. Visit my website, makinlemonade.com. That's or makinlemonade.rocks, not .com. MAKIN lemonade.rocks. And you can check out my YouTube channel, see some of the things that I'm posting up on there. Really, right now, the only things that are going up are Daddy-Daughter Dinner Times, a video series that I'm doing with my two girls, where I'm trying to cook them dinner and learn how to cook, and they're trying to eat my dinner and learn to compliment me even when they don't like it. So anyway, I love you guys. Thanks for listening, and I hope to hear from you soon. Peace.